Hello, and thanks for checking out the channel. My name is CJ, and this is Cumberland Brewing Company. So if you found yourself here today, you're probably wanting to know how to wash your yeast. So I'm going to show you my process for washing yeast. I'm actually in the process of kegging a lager that I brewed. This actually finished out in about a week. I used a lager yeast with it, so not traditionally the lager method, but close enough for myself here in the man cave. So the yeast that I used here is White Labs WLP830 German lager yeast. This was actually a washed batch that I had already previously done. So this will be the second washing that I've used of the same yeast. So I'm interested to see if there's any drop off as far as taste or quality goes, because I'm still kind of new to this as far as the yeast washing goes. But yeast washing is one of the easier things that you can do in the homegrown world to save yourself some time and some money. It's really not all that difficult. So all you really need are a couple of sanitized mason jars. I've actually got 3 here that have got some star sand sitting in them. And you will also need some distilled water. So this was just left over from last week's brew day. I kept that in the refrigerator. So I'm going to go ahead and let this finish kegging, and then I'll show you what the fermenter looks like. And we'll get started with the yeast washing process here. So I've got my fermenter here. I went ahead and kegged off all the beer, so that's chilling in the kegerator now. So I've got my 3 sanitized mason jars, and then if we take a look inside the fermenter, obviously we got all that trub and hop matter at the bottom. This was a lager. Lagers are actually going to ferment at the bottom of the fermenter, so you're not going to have as much trub at the top, not as much particulate matter at the top. So what we're dealing with here, as you can see, not a lot of liquid left on it. It's mostly just that yeast cake. So I'm going to go ahead and try to decant off a little bit of this spent beer on the top of it, and then I will show you what we will do next. All right, so now that I've got the last couple ounces of the spent beer off of here, we are going to go ahead and take our distilled water. So I've got about half a gallon here, and I'm going to pour this over top of the yeast cake. Just making sure to try to break that up as much as I can. Depending on how long it's been fermenting, or if you cold crash or not, that yeast cake may be firmer to the bottom of your fermenter. So I'm going to give this a big swirl. All right, so I've got that yeast cake broken up, and now all that yeast is in suspension. So what we're going to do here, we're going to dump the star sand. And I'm going to give these lids a quick spray. Now, even though I'm not going to tighten these down, I'm still going to put the lids on top just while this has to sit for a while, just to keep any bacteria that's floating around in the air from infecting the yeast. So I'm going to give this one more quick swish to get all that yeast into suspension. Okay, so what we're going to do here now, make sure to spray this off too, even though I just disinfected it. The name of the game is sanitation in home brewing. So we're going to go ahead and cant some of this off here. So I'm thinking that I'm going to have enough to fill all 3 of these. And if I don't, it's not really a big deal. So, cut that one off there. And we're just going to repeat this for all 3 of these jars until we've got just about everything here out of the fermenter. So you can see it's a lot different looking than you know, the beer that you pull off in keg. It's a lot cloudier. There's a lot of particulate matter in it. But basically what we are doing here is getting all of that yeast into suspension, and we're going to let it settle out and let gravity do its thing. So all the hop matter and the particulate, basically everything that isn't beer or yeast, is going to settle down to the bottom of each one of these jars, and that takes a little bit of time. And then after that, you will see a noticeable difference in the layers of these jars, and the yeast will stay in suspension within the watery liquid that's going to rise to the top. Okay, a little bit more. All right. So I've got all 3 of these jars filled pretty much to the top, and I'm going to go ahead and close these off. I do have a little bit of leftover yeast here in the fermenter. I don't think I'm going to can it off, because I really don't need to. So really the next stage is just letting gravity and time do its thing. So this is going to settle out. I'm going to come back and check this in about 45 minutes and show you guys what it looks like. In the meantime, we get this cleaned up, and we'll go from there. All right, so we are back. It has been just over an hour since I pulled this yeast from the fermenter. So as you can tell, there's a pretty big difference between the bottom of these jars and the top. So what I was talking about was all this layer at the bottom is that trub and yeast, basically dead yeast cells, and a little bit of just particulate from the brew that has settled out towards the bottom because it's larger in density and weighs more. And then at the top, you have this clear layer, and that is clear living yeast. So the next step is getting all of this clear layer from each of these 3 jars into a separate jar. And I should have mentioned that in the last clip. We're going to need another jar here. So the last time that I did this, I had 3 jars. Evidently, I just decanted 2. So now that we have a third one decanted, what I'm going to end up doing is just spraying this jar, which has already been cleaned. I'm just going to spray some star sand in it, make sure it's good and sanitary, and then we're going to take this clear layer off the top of these 3 here. We may have to do a little switcheroo here and kind of clean this one out. I think we're going to probably have a little bit more than just 1 full jar, and that's totally fine, because when all this settles out, at the very end, we are going to you're going to see a layer of active yeast in the bottom of each one of these. That's going to take another day or so. So the next step, we're going to go ahead and spray this this next jar. So I'm just going to kind of give this a little rinse. Like I said, it was already cleaned, so mostly just making sure that it is extra sanitary. Okay, so without trying to disturb that yeast bed, or I guess the dead yeast bed at the bottom, we're going to try to pour all this off here and try to keep it as clean as we can. So I'll try to do this in the light here so we can kind of see what's going on. And it almost looks like beer. It is it's a little bit cloudy, but it almost looks like beer. And I'm starting to get a little bit of particulate matter in there, so I'm going to go ahead and hold off with that one. And I'll start on this next jar. attached to the top of this. So I'm going to go ahead and set this one aside and spray this lid off, because I'm going to close this off, and I'll explain what we're going to do here once we got both of these. So I will take, we're going to go ahead and pour the rest of this into here. We'll give it a little swirl first. And then we're going to spray this out just to kind of get some of that gunk off the walls of the jar. So all I'm doing is just repeating the process that I did with this. So I'm just taking this other jar that we initially used to let the yeast settle out with, and I'm going to decant off this clear liquid from this larger mason jar. So when it's all said and done, I'm going to have about a jar and a half of washed yeast. So that's actually a pretty good amount. So like I had said earlier on, this process, it doesn't take a whole lot of time. Really what we're trying to do is filter out all the dead yeast from the living yeast. So the next step is to go ahead and refrigerate this. So I'm going to let this crash in the refrigerator, and you can store this in your refrigerator for my research, 30 days, upwards of a couple months. It depends on the strain of the yeast that you're using. So there you have it. That's the steps for washing yeast. It's pretty simple. Basically, if I was to brew, in the next week or 2 weeks, I could take one of these, let it sit out, just decant a little bit of the liquid off the top, swirl that fresh yeast up, and you can pitch that right into your fermenter. It's as easy as that. If I let this sit in the fridge a little bit longer, what I would probably do is just go ahead and make a yeast starter with it, just like you would a yeast starter from a packet, and make a liter starter and pitch that right into your wort. So if you like this video, if you feel like it was helpful, please be sure to give it a thumbs up, and be sure to subscribe for more videos in the future from Cumberland Brewing Company. This is CJ signing off. Cheers.